The probe sat on the steel table like a metal egg. It was ugly. Dull gray, covered in wires, no bigger than a dog. Dr. Lena Vasquez stared at it through the thick glass window of the control room and chewed on her thumbnail. Behind her, 3 screens filled with numbers she had checked 9 times already. "Power is at 60%, said Tomas, her lead engineer, from the far console. He was young, too young to be doing illegal science on a rusted orbital station floating above Mars. But here they were. "Take it to 80, Lena said. Tomas looked at her. 80 was where we lost the last probe. I remember. I built the last probe. She did not look away from the window. 80. He pushed the slider up. The lights in the station dimmed. Somewhere deep below them, the quantum coils hummed louder, a sound like a giant taking a breath. The probe began to vibrate on the table. Lena pressed her hand against the glass. She had spent 11 years chasing this idea. Quantum state displacement, moving matter from one place to another without crossing the space in between. No gates, no council-approved travel lanes, just here and then there. Every species in the galaxy said it was impossible. The Council of Elder Races said it was forbidden to even try. Lena did not care much about what the Council said, not after what they did to her partner Yuki during the last compliance audit. They called it an accident that killed 1 person and destroyed an entire lab. 90%, Tomas said quietly. He had not been told to go that high, but he knew Lena. He knew tonight was the night she would either break through or break everything. The probe was shaking hard now. The air around it looked wrong, like heat rising off a road on a summer day. The numbers on the screens were climbing in ways that did not match any of their models. "Lena," Tomas said, "the displacement field is not forming locally. It is reaching out, way out. I am seeing spatial warping at distances we have never recorded before." "How far?" He went quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had just seen something that broke his understanding of the universe. 14 light years. Lena turned from the window. "What? The field is anchored at 2 points. Here, and somewhere in the Proxima Centauri system. Lena, this is not a local jump. This is interstellar." She looked back at the probe. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. "Send it." Tomas hit the button. The probe vanished. Not in a flash, not with a bang. It simply stopped being on the table. One moment it was there. The next, the table was empty. The air rushed in to fill the space where it had been, making a soft pop, like someone opening a bottle. 3 seconds later, the deep space antenna array on the far side of the station lit up. A signal, coming from Proxima Centauri. The probe's transponder, broadcasting its location, its status, its temperature. Everything normal. Everything intact. The probe was sitting in empty space, 14 light-years away, and it had arrived there in less than a heartbeat. Lena sat down on the floor. Her legs would not hold her anymore. "We did it," she whispered. Tomas was staring at his screens with his mouth open. "We did not just do teleportation. We broke the gates. We broke the whole system. The Council's entire power is built on controlling the gates, and we just made them worthless." Lena knew. She knew what this meant for humanity, for every species that had ever been held under the Council's thumb. She also knew what the Council would do when they found out. And they would find out. An energy burst like the one they had just created would light up every sensor array in the sector like a bonfire in a dark room. She was right. 800 light-years away, on the Council's fortress world of Dralith Prime, a screen blinked in a dark room. An old Dralith named Jakan, the Grand Arbiter of the Inner Quorum, leaned forward in his chair. He had held that chair for 600 years. He had watched over 200 young species rise, reach too far, and get pushed back down. He was very good at his job. The screen showed him the energy spike from Sol space. It showed him the quantum signature, the spatial displacement pattern, the distance. His thin gray fingers tightened on the arm of his chair. Thread resonance, he said softly. It was a term that had been erased from every public database in the galaxy 10,000 years ago. A technology so dangerous that every species that discovered it had been quietly and completely destroyed. He pressed a button on his console. Dispatch the 7th Compliance Fleet to Sol Space, full quarantine protocol, and prepare the silencer, just in case. On a bright, airy station orbiting a blue-green world, far from both Earth and Dralith Prime, a Valith diplomat named Errolthin intercepted the fleet orders. Errolthin was tall, thin, and covered in softly glowing patterns of light that shifted with their mood. Right now, the patterns were flickering fast, which meant fear. Errolthin had spent decades secretly helping humanity, feeding them small pieces of information, warning them about inspections. They did this not because they loved humans especially, but because they had read the old histories, the ones the Council tried to erase, and they knew what the Council did to species that grew too clever. The Valith had survived only because they learned to be useful and quiet. Errolthin was tired of being quiet. They opened a hidden communication channel, one that bounced through 17 relay points to avoid detection, and sent a short message to a human intelligence officer on Earth. A compliance fleet is coming. 200 warships. They know what you have done. You have maybe 5 days. Hide everything. Hide everyone. On Mars, Lena stood at the window of the station and looked out at the red planet below. Somewhere down there, 8 million people lived in domed cities, unaware that the galaxy was about to come crashing down on them. Behind her, Thomas was already backing up the research data to portable drives. "Where do we go?" he asked. Lena thought of Yuki. She thought of every species whose name had been erased from history because they dared to reach too far. She picked up one of the drives and held it tight. "We go where they cannot find us, and we keep working." 200 Council warships dropped out of gate space at the edge of the Sol system. Their commander, a scarred Dralith admiral, opened a channel to Earth and spoke in a voice that expected obedience. "This system is under quarantine by order of the Galactic Council. You will surrender all research data and submit to technological regression within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in corrective action." On the bridge of a tiny, outdated human corvette called the Defiance, Commander Rhett Okoro listened to the transmission and turned it off. He looked at his crew. 26 people on a ship that the Council would not even use as a cargo hauler. "Well," he said calmly, "this is going to be a long week." He turned to his navigator. "Plot a course for the outer system. Nice and slow. Let them see us. And keep them very, very far from Mars." And on Dralith Prime, Grand Arbiter Jokan sat in his dark room and stared at the blinking screen. The humans were a small species, young, weak, easy to manage. He had done this 100 times before. "Suppress them," he said to no one in particular, "as we always do." He did not yet know that this time would be different. That this time, the species he was trying to suppress had just torn a hole in the fabric of his empire. The Council's compliance fleet spread across the Sol system like a net closing around a fish. 200 warships, each one longer than a human city block, took positions around Earth, Mars, and every major station in between. Their hulls were dark and smooth, built by species that had been making weapons of war since before humans had learned to use fire. Against them, humanity had 47 ships. Most of them were patrol vessels with guns designed to stop pirates, not fight empires. On Earth, the Terran government did exactly what it was supposed to do. It smiled, it bowed, it said, "Yes, of course, we will cooperate fully." Diplomats in expensive suits shook hands with Council officials and promised that all research data would be turned over within the deadline. Committees were formed, meetings were scheduled, papers were signed. It was all a lie. Every handshake, Every smile, every promise bought time, and time was the only weapon humanity had. Deep in the outer reaches of the solar system, past the orbit of Neptune, past the scattered icy rocks of the Kuiper Belt, there was an asteroid that did not appear on any official map. It had been hollowed out over 20 years by Terran intelligence, turned into a secret research station hidden inside a shell of rock and ice. They called it Prometheus Station. It had no windows. It had no official crew roster. As far as the galaxy was concerned, it did not exist. Lena arrived there on a transport disguised as a mining shuttle. She carried 3 things: the portable drives with her research data, a photograph of Yuki that she kept in her jacket pocket, and an anger that burned so hot and so steady that it kept her moving when her body wanted to collapse from exhaustion. Prometheus Station was cold and gray, and hummed with the sound of machines that never stopped running. 32 of humanity's best physicists, engineers, and mathematicians were already there, pulled from universities and labs across Earth and Mars in the dead of night. They looked scared. Lena did not blame them. "Here is what we know," she told them on her first day. She stood at the front of a metal room with no decorations and a single flickering light. "We can teleport matter across interstellar distances. We did it once. Now we need to do it again, and again. And we need to do it with something bigger than a 40-kilogram probe. We need to move people." A young physicist named Dara raised her hand. "The energy requirements to move a living human being across even 1 light-year would be enormous. We do not have a power source that large." "Then we build one," Lena said. They worked. They slept 4 hours a night, ate food that came out of machines, and filled every wall of the station with equations and diagrams and arguments. Lena pushed them hard. Too hard, some of them thought. But Lena knew something they did not. She knew what the Council did to species that discovered this technology. And she knew the clock was ticking. It was Arelthin who gave her the missing piece. The Valith diplomat had been playing a dangerous game for years, pretending to be a loyal Council servant while secretly copying classified files from the Council's deepest archives. 3 weeks after Lena arrived at Prometheus Station, a data packet appeared on her private terminal. No sender, no return address, just a file, heavily encrypted, with a single note attached. "This is what they do not want you to know. Be careful. Be fast." Lena decrypted the file and read it alone in her quarters. When she finished, she sat in the dark for a long time. The file contained records going back over 30,000 years. Every time a species independently discovered what the Council called thread resonance. First, a compliance fleet would arrive. Then, if the species did not surrender the technology, their homeworld would be sterilized. Not attacked, not conquered, sterilized. Every living thing killed. Every building turned to dust. Every record erased. The species would be removed from galactic history as if it had never existed. There were 412 species on the list. 412 civilizations that had reached for the stars and been burned to nothing for it. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what the file said about the Council's own gate technology. The gates that controlled all interstellar travel, the gates that gave the Council its power, were built on a crippled version of thread resonance. The elder races had always known that true teleportation was possible. They had deliberately built an inferior system and forced it on everyone else, because a galaxy that depended on gates was a galaxy that depended on the Council. Lena took the photograph of Yuki out of her pocket and looked at it. "They have been doing this for 30,000 years, she whispered, and no one ever stopped them." She went back to the lab and worked for 48 hours straight. While Lena worked in the dark, Commander Okoro fought in the light. His corvette, the Defiance, was small and old, but it was fast and its crew was smart. The Council had sent scout ships into the outer system, searching for anything unusual. Okoro's job was to make sure they found nothing. He ran decoy operations. He set up false energy signatures on empty asteroids. He led Council scouts on long, winding chases through the belt, always staying just close enough to be interesting, but never close enough to be caught. Once, a Council destroyer came within 2,000 kilometers of Prometheus Station. Okoro flew the Defiance directly across its sensor array at full speed, blinding it for just long enough for the station's stealth systems to adjust. His crew aged 10 years and 10 seconds, but it worked. "How long can we keep this up?" his first officer asked one night when they were drifting in the shadow of a frozen moon with their engines off. "As long as we have to," Okoro said. He did not say what they both knew, that one small corvette could not outrun 200 warships forever. Back on Drelith Prime, Grand Arbiter Zhou Khan was growing impatient. The humans were cooperating on the surface, but his intelligence officers told him that no real research data had been surrendered. The humans were stalling. He had seen this behavior before, in species number 207, and species number 315, and all the others. They always hoped. They always thought they were different. He authorized the next step. Deep inside the flagship of the compliance fleet, hidden behind 3 layers of security, and known only to the fleet's admiral, there was a weapon called a silencer. It was old technology, older than the Council itself, built in an age when the elder races were still fighting each other. A silencer could crack a planet's crust like an eggshell. It could turn a world of oceans and forests into a ball of molten rock in less than a minute. There was one attached to every compliance fleet, just in case. Zhou Khan sent a single encrypted message to the fleet admiral. "Prepare the silencer. Target, Mars. If the humans do not comply within 1 week, demonstrate consequences." On Prometheus Station, Lena stood in front of a teleportation pad that her team had built from scrap metal and stolen parts. On the pad was not a probe. Inside the shuttle were 2 human volunteers, a pilot named Chen and a biologist named Okafor, strapped into their seats with their hearts beating so fast the monitors could barely keep up. "Destination is locked," Tomas said from the control room. 40 light-years, Barnard's star system. Lena looked at the shuttle through the glass. She thought about the 412 species who never got this far. She pressed the button. The shuttle vanished with a soft pop. 3 seconds of silence. 5. 10. Then the antenna array lit up. A signal from Barnard's star. Chen's voice, shaking but alive. "Prometheus Station, this is Shuttle 1. We are here. We are okay. Oh my God, we are okay." Lena's team erupted into cheering. People hugged. People cried. Tomas sat down on the floor and put his head in his hands and laughed until he could not breathe. She looked at the data streaming across her screen and let herself feel, just for one moment, something she had not felt in years. Hope. "They cannot cage us anymore," she said quietly. 100,000 kilometers away, the silencer powered up in the belly of the Council flagship. Its targeting systems locked onto the red surface of Mars. 8 million people lived under those domes. They were eating dinner. They were reading to their children. They were watching the stars. They had no idea what was coming. The beam hit Mars at dawn. It came from the belly of the Council flagship, a thread of white light so bright that it turned the blackness of space into daylight for 1,000 kilometers in every direction. It struck the surface near Olympus City, the largest human settlement on the planet, and carved a line across the red rock that stretched 400 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide. The ground did not just burn, it melted. It turned to glass. The air above the scar caught fire, and the shockwave flattened 3 domed cities like paper. 11,000 people died in 90 seconds. The energy burst from the silencer was so massive that every sensor array in the galaxy detected it. On 100 different worlds, astronomers and scientists looked at their screens and went pale. They knew what a silencer looked like. They had seen the signatures in old records, from the times when the Council erased civilizations that grew too clever. But those records were supposed to be sealed. Those weapons were supposed to be a myth. The Council's official statement came 1 hour after the strike. Grand Arbiter Jokon appeared on every major galactic broadcast, his gray face calm, his voice flat and steady. An asteroid had struck Mars, he said. The Council had attempted to intercept it but failed. The Council expressed its deepest sympathy for the human loss of life. Nobody believed him. But nobody said anything. That was how it worked in the Council's galaxy. You saw what happened. You looked at your feet. You stayed quiet. On Earth, people screamed. They screamed in the streets, in their homes, in the halls of government. 11,000 names. 11,000 families torn apart. The Terran president addressed the planet with tears running down her face and rage in her voice. But she did not declare war. She could not. 47 ships against 200 was not a war. It was suicide. On Prometheus Station, Lena watched the footage of the strike on a small screen in her quarters. She watched the beam hit. She watched the cities flatten. She watched the dust cloud rise into the thin Martian atmosphere, like a brown fist reaching for the sky. She watched it 3 times. Then she turned the screen off and sat in silence for a long time. Tomas found her an hour later. He stood in the doorway and did not know what to say. 11,000, Lena said without looking up. Yes. They killed 11,000 people to send us a message. Yes. Lena stood up. Her eyes were dry and her voice was steady, and something in her face had changed. The fear was gone. Something harder had taken its place. Then we send them one back. She called her entire team into the main lab. They gathered around her, exhausted and terrified, some of them still red-eyed from crying. She looked at each of them, and then she spoke. We are not going to build a weapon. We are not going to fire back. We do not need to. The Council's power is not built on weapons. It is built on lies. For 30,000 years, they have controlled the galaxy by controlling what people know. They erased histories. They destroyed anyone who discovered the truth. They kept every species afraid and ignorant and dependent. She held up a portable drive. I have the proof. Every genocide, every suppressed technology, every species they wiped from existence. The full Council archives, going back 30,000 years. Aralthin gave them to us. She set the drive down on the table. We are going to teleport broadcast relays into the heart of every major species home system. Not 1, not 10, all of them, every species in the Council, simultaneously. And those relays will transmit this data on every frequency, in every language, to every screen and speaker and device in the galaxy. They will not be able to block it. They will not be able to stop it. Every living being in the galaxy will learn the truth at the same time. The room was silent. Dara, the young physicist, spoke first. You want to teleport hundreds of devices across the galaxy at the same time? Yes. We have never teleported more than one object at a time. Then we figure it out. We have the theory, we have the power, and we have something the Council does not have. Lena's voice dropped. We have 11,000 reasons to get this right. They worked for 6 days. They did not sleep. They built 419 broadcast relays from every piece of spare equipment on the station. Each relay was small, no bigger than a suitcase, packed with transmitters powerful enough to broadcast across an entire star system. Lena's team rewrote their teleportation equations to handle simultaneous displacement of multiple objects to multiple destinations. The math was brutal. 3 people collapsed from exhaustion and had to be carried to the medical bay. Lena did not stop. Commander Okoro held the line. His corvette danced through the outer system, drawing Council scouts away from the station. He lost 2 crew members when a Council destroyer clipped the Defiance with a grazing shot that tore through the engine room. He kept flying. He had heard about Mars. He had family on Mars, 2 cousins who lived in a small dome near Olympus City. He did not know yet if they were alive or dead. He did not have time to find out. On day 6, everything was ready. Lena stood at the master control console. 419 relays sat on teleportation pads throughout the station, each one targeted at a different star system, each one loaded with the same data, the full Council archives. The truth. On my mark, she said. The station powered up. The quantum coils screamed. The lights went out completely, and for a moment, everyone stood in total darkness, surrounded by nothing but the sound of machines, working harder than they were ever designed to work. Lena pressed the button. 419 relays vanished at the same instant. Across the galaxy, in star systems separated by thousands of light years, 419 small metal boxes appeared from nowhere. They appeared in orbit around homeworlds, next to space stations, in the middle of shipping lanes. They bypassed every defense system, every gate checkpoint, every border patrol. They simply appeared, as if they had always been there. And they began to broadcast. The data flooded every network. Every screen on every world lit up with information that had been buried for 30,000 years. Species learned that their histories had been rewritten, that their ancestors had been conquered, not uplifted, that technologies they had been told were impossible had been stolen from them and locked away, that civilizations they had never heard of had been murdered in silence, their names erased, their worlds turned to ash. The Korvathi, a proud warrior species that had served as the Council's military backbone for 8,000 years, discovered that their original homeworld had been destroyed by the Council and replaced with a colony they were tricked into believing was their ancestral home. The Seluri, gentle ocean dwellers who had always believed they evolved on their current world, learned that they were refugees, survivors of a genocide that killed 90% of their species 4,000 years ago. The Valith discovered that 3 of their colony worlds had been secretly sterilized during the last millennium, the populations blamed on a plague that never existed. Every species had a wound they did not know they carried, and now, all at once, those wounds were torn open. The galaxy erupted. Riots broke out on 100 worlds. Council offices were stormed. Statues of Council leaders were torn down. Fleet commanders who had spent their careers enforcing Council law looked at the data and refused to follow orders. 3 entire battle groups mutinied within the first 12 hours. And on Drelith Prime, Grand Arbiter Zokon sat in his dark room and watched his empire crack. His hands were trembling. It was a small movement, barely visible, but it was there. He had held power for 600 years through control, through fear, through the careful management of what people were allowed to know. And in one moment, a small, young, insignificant species had torn all of it away. He felt something he did not recognize. It sat in his chest, like a cold stone. It took him a moment to identify it, because he had not felt it in centuries. It was fear. Far away, on the battered bridge of the Defiance, Commander Okoro received a transmission from Prometheus Station, confirming the broadcast was complete. Around him, his crew listened to the galactic comm channels, filled with chaos, shouting, crying, and the sound of a galaxy waking up from a 30,000-year sleep. 3 elder species broke from the Council that day and declared their support for humanity. 12 more were on the edge. Okoro looked out at the stars and said the words that would be repeated on 1,000 worlds in 1,000 languages for 1,000 years. You taught the galaxy to kneel. We are going to teach it to stand. The war that followed was not the kind of war the Council had fought before. For 90,000 years, galactic warfare had been simple. You moved your fleets through the gates, you blockaded systems, you cut off supply lines, you surrounded your enemy and squeezed until they could not breathe. The Council was very good at this kind of war. They had the biggest fleets, the most powerful weapons, and the only keys to the gate network. But humanity did not fight through the gates. The first sign that something had changed came at the Korvathi shipyards in the Talon system. The shipyards were enormous, a ring of stations orbiting a gas giant, where the Council built its heaviest warships. 40 dreadnoughts were being assembled there, each one a mountain of metal and guns that could destroy a small moon. The shipyards were protected by 3 defense fleets and a minefield so thick that a fly could not pass through without being detected. On a Tuesday morning, by Earth's calendar, 16 humans appeared inside the main control station of the shipyard. They did not come through the gates. They did not fly in on ships. They simply appeared, standing in the middle of the command center, wearing light combat armor and carrying devices that looked like metal briefcases. The Korvathi guards stared at them. "Good morning," said the squad leader, a woman named Sergeant Diaz. "We are here to shut this down." She pressed a button on her briefcase. Every computer system in the shipyard went dark. Every crane stopped. Every assembly robot froze. The briefcases were not weapons. They were electromagnetic pulse devices, designed to kill electronics without hurting anyone. The 40 half-built dreadnoughts sat dead in their frames. Billions of credits worth of warship turned into scrap metal in 1 second. Then the 16 humans vanished, teleported back to wherever they had come from, leaving behind nothing but a room full of confused guards and 40 useless ships. It happened again the next day, and the next, and the next. Human strike teams appeared inside Council fuel depots and drained the tanks. They appeared on the bridges of warships and replaced the navigation computers with devices that played human music at full volume. They appeared in the private offices of Council admirals and left printed copies of the surrender terms on their desks, next to their morning coffee. The Council had no defense against this. Their entire military was built around controlling gates and space lanes. Teleportation ignored all of it. You could not blockade an enemy that did not need to travel. You could not surround an enemy that could appear behind you whenever they wanted. You could not cut supply lines when supplies simply materialized where they were needed. The Council's admirals were smart, experienced, and ruthless. They tried everything. They developed jamming fields designed to disrupt quantum signatures. The humans teleported around them. They set traps, filling key installations with soldiers and automated weapons. The humans teleported in, set off their EMP devices, and teleported out before anyone could fire a shot. They moved their command centers to secret locations. The humans found them anyway. It was not just humanity fighting now. The broadcast of the Council archives had broken something fundamental in the galaxy's power structure. Species that had obeyed the Council for thousands of years suddenly had reasons to disobey. The Korvathi, enraged by the truth about their homeworld, pulled their entire military out of Council service. The Celery shut down the water purification systems they maintained for dozens of Council worlds and demanded reparations. Smaller species, the ones that had always been too afraid to speak, began to speak very loudly. They called themselves the Free Accord. It started as a loose alliance of rebel species communicating through encrypted channels. Within weeks, it had a council of its own, a shared fleet, and a single simple goal: replace the Council with something that did not rule through lies and fear. Commander Okoro became the Free Accord's military commander, not because he was the most experienced officer, but because he was the one everyone trusted. He had flown a tiny corvette against 200 warships and survived. He had lost crew members and kept fighting. And he was the one who had said the words that the whole galaxy was now repeating. Lena, meanwhile, was pushing the technology further than anyone thought possible. On Prometheus Station, she and her team worked on mass teleportation, the ability to move not just people and small devices, but entire ships, entire fleets, across the galaxy in an instant. The math was staggering. The energy requirements were terrifying. But Lena had learned something about herself in the weeks since Mars. She learned that she worked best when she was angry. The Council was losing. Slowly, painfully, but unmistakably, the empire that had ruled the galaxy for 90,000 years was coming apart. Fleets were shrinking as crews deserted. Worlds were going silent, refusing to answer Council communications. The Gate Network, once the symbol of the Council's absolute control, was becoming irrelevant in a galaxy where teleportation existed. Grand Arbiter Zhou Khan watched it all from his dark room on Drelith Prime. He had not left that room in weeks. He did not eat much. He sat in his chair and watched the reports come in, and felt the cold stone of fear in his chest grow heavier every day. He had one option left. He had hoped he would never have to use it. It was called the Architect Protocol. It was the oldest secret in the galaxy, older than the Council itself, written into the foundation of the Gate Network by the first Elder Species before they disappeared into history. The Architect Protocol was simple. Every gate in the galaxy had a silencer built into it. Not the small ship-mounted silencers used by compliance fleets. These were the real ones. Planet killers, star killers, weapons powerful enough to sterilize entire solar systems. There were over 400 of them, one in every major gate, aimed at the nearest inhabited world. If the Council ever truly lost control, if the order of the galaxy was ever truly threatened, the Architect Protocol would activate every single one. The message would be simple: submit or everything burns. Zhou Khan entered the activation code. Across the galaxy, 412 silencers powered up inside the Gate Network. 412 weapons, each one aimed at a populated world. Billions of lives held hostage. He broadcast his ultimatum on every channel. The rebellion ends now. All species will return to Council authority immediately. If compliance is not achieved within 48 hours, I will fire. Every world that resists will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact. The galaxy went quiet. On a station in the Valith home system, Errolthin heard the ultimatum and knew what they had to do. They had spent years copying Council files, learning Council secrets, building a map of every hidden weapon and every buried truth. They had the locations of every silencer in the Gate Network, all 412. They transmitted the data to the Free Accord on an open channel. They did not encrypt it. They did not hide their identity. They knew the Council would trace the signal in seconds. The Council's security forces arrived at their station 11 minutes later. They found Errolthin standing in the middle of their quarters, the soft bioluminescent patterns on their skin growing steady and calm. There was no fear left in them. They had burned through all of it years ago. The Council broadcast the execution live. They wanted it to be a warning. Errolthin stood before the camera and looked directly into it. Millions of beings across the galaxy were watching. Errolthin spoke their last words clearly, in a voice that did not shake. Remember what they made you forget. Then they were gone. On Prometheus Station, Lena received the silencer locations and stared at the star map. 412 red dots, each one a loaded gun pointed at a living world. Billions of people. She had 48 hours. She looked at the map for a long time. Then she turned to Tomas. "I have an idea," she said. "It is completely insane." Tomas looked at her. He had known her for 15 years. He had followed her from legal labs to illegal stations to the edge of a galactic war. He was not surprised anymore. "When has that ever stopped you?" he said. Lena almost smiled. Almost. Lena laid it out for them simply because there was no time for complicated. We are not going to disable the silencers. We're not going to destroy them. We are going to move them. All 412 at the same time. We are going to teleport every single one of them to the same place. She tapped the star map, and a single point lit up. Dralith Prime. The room was silent. You want to aim 400 planet-killing weapons at the Council's own homeworld, Tomas said. Yes. Are we going to fire them? No. We are going to point them. That is all. We're going to show Zhou Khan what it feels like to look up at the sky and see his own death staring back at him. We're going to give him the same choice he gave the rest of the galaxy. Submit or burn. She paused. And then we're going to offer him something he never offered anyone else. Mercy. Dara was already running the numbers. The energy requirement is beyond anything we have ever attempted. We are talking about moving 400 massive objects across thousands of light years simultaneously. We will need every teleportation device we have built, every single one, and the power draw will burn them all out. This is a one-shot operation. If it fails, we have nothing left. Then it doesn't fail, Lena said. They had 36 hours. Prometheus Station became a factory. Every engineer, every physicist, every person who could hold a tool worked without stopping. They pulled power cells from the station's own life support systems. They rewired the quantum coils until the entire asteroid hummed like a tuning fork. Lena wrote equations on the walls with a marker, because the computers were all being used for calculations. 20 hours in, Lena's hands started shaking. Not from fear, from exhaustion. Tomas brought her coffee, and she drank it standing up, without tasting it. He looked at her and saw something in her eyes that he recognized from the night of the first probe test. That same steady fire, that same refusal to stop. Yuki would be proud of you, he said quietly. Lena's hands stopped shaking. She nodded once and went back to work. While Lena built her impossible machine, Commander Okoro gathered the Free Accord fleet for the last fight. It was not a pretty fleet. Human corvettes flew alongside Korvathi battlecruisers and Saluri waterships, and a dozen other designs from a dozen other species. Some of the ships were old. Some were damaged. All of them had crews who had chosen to be there, who had looked at Zhou Khan's ultimatum and decided that they would rather fight than kneel. Okoro stood on the bridge of his new flagship, a captured council cruiser that the Free Accord had renamed the Errolthin. He looked at the fleet, forming up around him on the tactical display. 387 ships. Against the Council's remaining forces, it was not enough. But their job was not to win. Their job was to buy Lena time. All ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel. His voice was calm and steady, the way it always was when things were at their worst. We are going to hit the Council's defensive perimeter around Dralith Prime. We are going to make a lot of noise. We are going to keep them looking at us and not at anything else. Some of us are not going to make it home. He paused. But what we do today decides what the galaxy looks like tomorrow. So let us make it count. The Free Accord fleet jumped through the gate network, the old-fashioned way, toward Dralith Prime. The Council's defense fleet was waiting for them. 600 warships, the largest concentration of military power in galactic history, arranged in a wall of metal and firepower between the Free Accord and the Council's homeworld. The battle began at 1100 hours, Galactic Standard Time. It was brutal. The Council ships were bigger, stronger, and better armed. The Free Accord fleet hit them like a wave breaking against a cliff. Ships burned, hulls cracked open and spilled their air into the void. The Korvathi battlecruiser Vengeful Spirit rammed a Council dreadnought at full speed, destroying both ships and clearing a hole in the defensive line. On the bridge of the Arelthin, Okoro commanded from the center of the chaos. A missile struck the ship's port side and threw him across the bridge. He got up with blood running down his face, grabbed the railing, and kept giving orders. His tactical officer told him their shields were failing. His engineer told him the engines were overheating. He said, "Hold the line." His communications officer told him they had lost 60 ships in the first 20 minutes. He said, "Hold the line." They held the line. On Prometheus Station, Lena watched the clock. She needed 12 more minutes. The teleportation array was charged and ready. 412 target locks were confirmed. Every device they had built was online and straining at the edge of its limits. The station itself was groaning, the rock walls cracking under the stress of the energy building inside them. "Tomaz," she said. "Ready? Start the sequence." The quantum coils fired. The sound was like nothing anyone had ever heard, a deep rising tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the fabric of space itself was singing. The station shook, cracks appeared in the walls, lights exploded, equipment sparked and smoked. Lena stood at the console with her hands on the controls and watched the numbers climb. 90%, 95, 98. The station was tearing itself apart. Rocks fell from the ceiling. A support beam buckled and crashed to the floor 3 meters from where Lena was standing. She did not move. 100%. She pressed the button. For one moment, one single heartbeat of time, something extraordinary happened. Thread resonance, the fundamental vibration of space itself, sang across the entire galaxy. Every species, on every world felt it. Not with their ears, not with their instruments, with something deeper, something older, a trembling in the bones of the universe, as if reality itself had taken a breath. 412 silencers vanished from inside the gate network, and 412 silencers appeared in perfect orbital formation around Drelith Prime. On the Council's homeworld, every alarm went off at once. People looked up at the sky and saw lights appearing, one after another, forming a ring around their world. Each light was a weapon, powerful enough to crack a planet in half. 412 of them, all aimed down. The battle stopped. Every ship on both sides went silent. Every gun stopped firing. Every pilot froze with their hands on their controls. The galaxy held its breath. Grand Arbiter Zhokan stood at the great window of his chamber and looked up at the ring of lights in his sky. 412 weapons, his weapons, the weapons he had built to keep the galaxy in chains. Now they were pointed at him. He understood then. In that quiet moment, with the lights of his own doomsday machines reflected in his ancient eyes, he understood what humanity was. They were not a pest to be managed. They were not a mistake to be corrected. They were something the Council had spent 90,000 years trying to prevent. A species that would not stop, that would not kneel, that when pushed to the edge of extinction, would find a way to push back so hard that the whole universe felt it. A communication channel opened. Lena's voice, tired and rough and unbroken, filled his chamber. "Grand Arbiter, you gave the galaxy a choice. Submit or burn. Now we are giving you the same choice." A pause. "But we are also giving you a third option, one you never gave anyone else." Zhokan's voice was barely a whisper. "What option?" "Peace. Real peace. Not the silence of fear. Not the obedience of slaves. Peace between equals. The Council dissolves. The gate monopoly ends. All suppressed technologies are released to every species. All erased histories are restored. Every species governs itself. And these weapons are dismantled. Every single one, including yours, including ours. And if I refuse?" Another pause, longer this time. "You will not refuse, because you are looking up at your own sky right now, and you know exactly what it feels like. Every species you ever threatened felt this. Every world you held hostage felt this. Now you feel it too. Her voice softened, just slightly. We could fire. You know we could. But we are not you. We did not come here to destroy. We came here to end the cycle. So end it, please. The silence that followed lasted 47 seconds. It was the longest 47 seconds in the history of the galaxy. Then Jokan closed his eyes, and he said, I accept. The galaxy changed that day. Not all at once, not perfectly. The council dissolved over the following months, in a mess of negotiations, arguments, and compromises that tested everyone's patience. The Gate Network was open to all species. The suppressed technologies were released, histories were restored, and the names of 412 murdered civilizations were spoken aloud for the first time in thousands of years. It was messy and difficult and sometimes painful, but it was free. 2 years later, Lena stood on a balcony on Mars. The scar was still visible on the surface below, a long glassy line across the red rock. They had built a memorial garden along its edge. Flowers grew there now. Earth flowers and Martian flowers and flowers from a dozen other worlds, planted by a dozen different species. It was the most visited place on Mars. Okoro found her there. He walked with a slight limp now, a souvenir from the battle, and there was a scar across his forehead that he refused to have removed. He stood beside her and looked up at the sky. Ships blinked in and out of existence above them. Human freighters, Korvathi trading vessels, Seluri waterships. A Valith passenger liner shimmered into being next to a human shuttle, their hulls almost touching, two species sharing the same sky. They watched in silence for a long time. Think they will be okay? Lena asked. All of them out there? Okoro watched the ships come and go. He thought about the people he had lost, about the bridge of the Defiance, about Errolfin standing in front of the camera with their light glowing steady and calm. He thought about what it cost to get here, and he thought about what it meant that they had gotten here at all. They are free now, he said. That is enough. Above Mars, a memorial station floated in silent orbit. Carved into its hull were 11,000 names. And beneath the names, written in every known language in the galaxy, was a single line. We remember.